hackathons. So let's call the speaker for today's session. He's one of the best speakers of his domain. He is one of the best speakers of his domain, striving hard to motivate people by sharing his knowledge and experience. He is currently working for Zardal, an online streaming application. Before Zardal, he worked with Swiggy and created some very exciting products for them. He also runs his own podcast, Take It Easy, with over 40K streams on Spotify. I guess it's very obvious who we are talking about. Guys, please welcome the very talented Ansh Mehra. Hello, Bhaiya.
Hi, thank you for calling me.
Yeah, Bhaiya. So today's session is about designing in hackathons. And the first question that most people ask is that why should a person go to hackathon? What is the experience like? What does it teach you?
So, I think a lot of students spend a lot of time buying online courses and learning stuff. But when you're in your own room creating code and doing your own design work, you're basically operating in a bubble. And it's very important to step outside your bubble, your own comfort zone, and compete with people who might know more than you. So hackathons allow you to get a reality check. They tell you where you actually stand because when you're working in isolation, you probably think you're doing the best things ever and you know the best tools and softwares. But when you go to a hackathon, you realize that there's a lot to learn. And because there's a deadline, you learn things quickly, you shift them quickly just because there's a deadline for midnight. So I think it really allows you to build a broader perspective as to how to get things done. And it really helps you do that in a very good, comfortable, organized manner.
Yeah, I agree with that. It gives everyone a good platform to experience in real world situations. So, for you, what is that one aspect of hackathons that you appreciate the most?
Uh, there are many actually, but I would recommend you guys to participate in hackathons that are beyond your own boundaries and your own city. So if you get an opportunity, do travel outside the state you're studying for a weekend hackathon. If possible, apply for international hackathons as well. So Major League Hacking, MLH, they regularly conduct some of the most amazing hackathons in the entire world. So I would recommend you guys to save some money for your travel, save up that piggy bank, and go for a hackathon which is outside your domain. Of course, now because of COVID, there are some restrictions, but when things open up, you should definitely try to travel and move beyond your bubble. So hackathons really allow you to meet people because you can't really go to a college and say, "Hi, hey, I just want to network with your students." You can't do that. You need a good reason to go there, and hackathons can be that one viable reason. Hackathon can be that one reason how you can get entry in places where you are usually not allowed. So it really opens up a lot of doors, and I would recommend everyone to consider that.
Yeah, true. So, okay, Bhaiya. So now we have kind of cleared the field as in why hackathons are important, how can they help a person. But now the one thing that most of the people who are new to this world of hackathons have this question is, how do you nail a hackathon? How do you win a hackathon? What is the winning strategy? So, what is your strategy for approaching hackathons?
So there are two answers to this. One answer is very motivating and very empowering, and the second answer is the reality. And the reality is that nobody can control if they win or not. Because winning is not just about how good you are at the hackathon, there are many, many external influences that decide whether you will succeed or not. Not just in hackathons, in almost every part of life. It could be a small mess up when you're pitching. It could be that one of the main judges doesn't understand your idea. It could be that when you have your third round of filtering, you actually pitch to the wrong person. Anything can happen, and these things are beyond your control. But what you can control is the probability of you winning. So if we say that nothing is definite, we can definitely influence the probability of us succeeding. And the only sure shot way of increasing the probability of winning is by being a very strong competitor, by working really, really hard on what you're doing. So instead of figuring out a strategy as to how to win, you need to figure out a strategy as to how to be the best competitor. Because if you're the best competitor, it basically means that you're actually a warning to everyone else in the arena, and you're basically one step ahead of everyone else. And if you're one step ahead of everyone else, your probability of succeeding raises. But you can't really say that I will win for sure, because in many areas of life, people who are one step ahead also do not win. So being one step ahead is really not the sure shot way, but this is one approach you can take.
Yeah, it's like a very good suggestion of being a very good competitor rather than focusing on actually just winning something. Actually, gives us a very good team spirit too and a sportsmanship. So, speaking of team spirit, how can a person choose the perfect team for a hackathon? Sometimes people think that it's my friend, so I should go with my friend. Sometimes people think that no, this guy's actually really good at what he or she does, and maybe I should go with them. So how do you choose that perfect team of balance, like the perfect balance between the teammates and all those other things?
So actually, there are three stages of awareness for this. If you're just starting out, you would have a lot of friction to go for your first hackathon. That is that you're in your first level of awareness. In this first level of awareness, you should go with someone who's your friend so that you're not shy and you have enough confidence to go there. The second level of awareness comes in when you realize that, wait, my friend and I cannot handle everything. I need someone to complement our skill sets. And that is when you hire people who can do things that you cannot do. So that is the second level of awareness. And once you've got people on board, there's a third level when you realize that maybe I don't have to do anything. Maybe my friend is getting bored. So you have a conversation, you have a very candid conversation with your friends and whoever has made it to this point that listen, I don't think you need my team. I don't think the team needs you. Let's figure out a way to depart gracefully and let's do something which will increase our chances of winning. So that is on the third level. And you can't directly skip to the third level without doing the first two. It's sort of like an escalator. So be very self-aware of what level you are on, what level are you operating at, and then figure out how you can move to the next stage.
True, true. So, yeah, how was your first experience at hackathons?
Amazing, dude. I think my first hackathon was Code to Create. I think this was in 2017. So it's been 4 years now. Pretty awesome, man. I mean, a friend of mine, not even a friend of mine, a random person picked me up from hostel saying that I heard that you do Photoshop and I am a very fancy app developer. So do you want a chance to come with me? And I didn't know anything about hackathons at all. So that is when I went there, and it was only because of that one single shot, one single tukka, you can say, that I realized that there's something called UX design. So that is how I stopped doing Photoshop and entered design.
So now, speaking of UX design, a lot of people have this question that what is actually the role of a designer in a hackathon? Because from the term, it seems like developing apps. So what is a designer doing in a hackathon? People are very confused about that. Could you just clear that up?
I mean, there's not a very clear, concise answer to this because the definition keeps on changing. The definition keeps on changing with time. The definition changes from organization to organization because it's very subjective as to where your company is and where your idea is. But if I want to give a very specific, to the point answer, it's basically a person who understands what functionality is required and how would a user interact with that functionality. And you do all this planning before you code it, because coding requires a lot of bandwidth, it requires a lot of time, the stakes are too high. So rather than testing everything after the code, you sort of make a map, you sort of make a direction, a compass as to where the product can lead so that you know where you're heading out. So without design, you're basically just starting out to code something which is in your thoughts. And converting thoughts into code can become a very messy process because things can get very vague when you have stakeholders. When you're the only person involved, whatever that you're thinking, you can directly code. But when you have stakeholders involved, you can't really talk to them through telepathy. You really have to give them visuals as to what I am doing and this is what we have in mind. So design allows you to bring all those stakeholders on board. You get to brainstorm and you get to brainstorm very quickly because in design you can prototype very quickly. In code you can't prototype very quickly. In design, designing a button would take like 15 seconds. In code it would take 30 minutes or maybe even more than that. So as a designer, you understand what is the requirement of the consumer, you understand what is the direction you can go in. And I'm just thinking out loud, there are so many things that a UX designer can do because UX itself is this huge umbrella. And as a starting out person, you can just basically watch some YouTube videos, but inside UX, there are branches that span out. It could be visual design, it could be UX research, it could be prototyping, it could be interaction design. There's a lot that you can do. But for now, I would recommend you guys, if you really want to know what UX is, go on YouTube and watch Abnux, ABN UX YouTube channel. There's Design Pilot, there's Whiteboard SM, there's Saptarshi Prakash, who's my mentor. His channel is there as well. So just figure out which channel to pick and just watch some of these videos.
To that was really helpful. I guess a lot of freshers would actually benefit from that information. So, Bhaiya, one other question that a lot of young designers, even myself, we have had this kind of a block where we are confused how to make a design visually, aesthetically pleasing, but at the same time functional. How do we balance the both and make them work together?
So I think you have to reverse engineer from functional to visual design. You start with a design that is supremely functional, that only serves its purpose, and then you find inspiration from various websites. There are so many websites available. Of course, your Dribbble and Pinterest are there as well, but there are websites like UI Sources. There's Mobile UX. There's SaaSLandingPages.com. A lot of websites that have good visual design cues. So you start with the functional design. See, in reality, you start with a wireframe. From wireframe, you go to a low fidelity functional design, which looks very bad, but it does its job. And from your functional design, you slowly transition to small visual improvement. So I think that is one approach that you can take. But in order to shift quickly from that functional to visual design, you have to develop an instinct. You have to develop this muscle where you can quickly create better looking designs. And for that, you have to develop your gut. And there's a very common practice that a lot of designers implement is that they copy UIs pixel to pixel for around 100 days. So pick one good looking screen, imitate it pixel to pixel, and do this 100 times. Do one screen every day, do it for 100 days. And after 100 days, you would develop this gut instinct in you. And you would instantly know where to go right, how to do the visual part.
Yeah, that was actually a very good advice. And the 100 days challenge, which is like a very common thing in almost all the fields nowadays, is
Yeah.
actually a very good way to brush up your skills and learn new things. So, one other thing that a lot of newcomers in hackathons face this issue is that, let's say they have a team of 5 people. There's a designer, there are two front end developers, and there are two back end developers. Now the issue is that the designer takes about 6 hours to code design the entire website. That takes out the time. Then the front end developer starts working on it, but then he finds certain design elements extremely hard to code. So how do how do people actually remove that wall in between, which creates these issues where there's a lot of back and forth? How can someone avoid that and stream flow their entire workflow? How would you suggest a person to do that?
See, this is a mini simulation of what happens in the real world as well. It's not like we only face this in hackathons, we face this in actual products as well. So there are 4, 5 things that you can do, but I would just list out the top 3 things. The first thing is that the developer, the designer, all these stakeholders need to sit together and first decide how much time do we have? What is the bandwidth that we have on board? The second thing is that you write down what are the problems you need to solve this time, not in the entirety of the product, but this time what are we trying to solve? And then you develop wireframes that circulate, that circumference is within that region. So you don't step outside those boundaries. You don't design something and then be like, oh wait, let's solve this problem as well. Let's do this as well. No, you decide 2, 3 things that you really have to do properly in the beginning. And when you're designing, you start giving out screens to your developers while you're designing the second screen. So rather than giving them the screens after 6 hours, you need to regularly have catch up calls where after 30 minutes or after 45 minutes, you tell your designer and developer that listen, this is the direction that I'm leading in. Is this all right? Would this be okay to implement? So that everyone is on the same page regularly. Because in a hackathon, you're basically sitting on the same table. It's not like you're in different houses. So collaborating and getting feedback is very rapid, it's very quick. So you need to get consistent feedback through all your stages and make sure that you really organize what problems you need to solve from the get go, from the first moment itself.
Yeah. So, like you said, Bhaiya, there needs to be a communication in each and every step of the way for for to streamline this entire process. Now, one thing that a lot of people face is conflict. When they are designing, and sometimes there is this kind of like a roughness between the team members as the hackathon progresses forward, because with time stress increases and things get very hard to handle. So how do you suggest someone to handle the stress in like a 48 or a 36 hour hackathon?
See, you can't really do this very quickly because this needs a lot of training. So as soon as your hackathon gets over, you have to train yourself in real life as well in your day-to-day interactions. And there are two, three books that you all should read. The first book that I would recommend everyone to read is Principles by Ray Dalio. Principles by Ray Dalio. Please buy this book and read this book. The second is I would recommend everyone to start working on their speech and fluency, the comprehension with which they speak, the way that they convey their ideas, the way they build their vocabulary. They really have to work on this because people will not really probe inside your head and try to understand what you're thinking. They will understand what you say. And if you don't say things properly, if you don't know how to calibrate your pitch, if you don't know how to calibrate your body language, if you don't understand psychology, if you don't understand how the human brain works, you would end up conflicting with their egos. You would end up hurting their egos, and that is the last thing you want. And this goes both ways. You really have to understand how to not have a fragile ego yourself. You really have to understand that these four or five people on this table have one simple shared goal, and that is to win this hackathon. Very few cases are there where some teammate has some personal agenda against another teammate, but in most cases, all five or six people are trying to win. The problem is that they are not able to convey their thoughts properly. And this is something that you cannot learn very quickly. You need 7, 8 months to truly understand how speech works, how fluency works. So read on these topics. I would request you all to follow Jordan Belfort, uh, follow Dan Locke, follow Grant Cardone, follow Naveen Jain. Uh, there's Robin Sharma. There is obviously there's Sandeep Maheshwari. A lot of people who really teach you how to think properly. And see, it's not just in hackathons, right? I mean, even outside hackathons, you really need to know how to handle people. Most of our success eventually depends on how good we are at handling people. If you're not good at handling people, you will eventually end up in a lot of trouble. So just learn these soft skills, and eventually other things will take care of themselves.
Yeah, that was actually a very good point of understanding people's psychology before making a comment and having a very good command over your language. I guess
Yeah,
that can solve a lot of conflicts in, I guess, everyday life itself.
yeah.
Now, one question that a lot of people have when they come right into college is that, okay, I do like design. I do like going to hackathons. And yes, it gives me, actual work experience, real life experience. But is how helpful is it in, like in the future, as in terms of jobs, placements, or any of those things? Does this actually matter, or do people actually look at it? So it would be really nice if you could clear that up for some of our viewers.
See, it's not just in design. अगर आप भुट्टे भी बेचना जानते हो and if you're good at it, there's a lot of scope in this world. There's a lot of scope in this world for people who are good at what they do. तो अगर आपको घास भी काटना आता है and if you really know how to cut grass well, you will earn a lot of money just from cutting grass because the best person, the richest person on the planet will hire you to maintain his garden. So these are all excuses. That is there any job? Is there any placement? There's so much happening in this world. There's so much of money to make, and there's so much of money in circulation that if you are not getting paid, it's not because there's not enough money in the market. It's just that you're not operating in the right space. You're just not good enough. You're not in the reach of the correct people. So the first step is that you have to be good at what you do. If you've decided that I want to do design, the first precondition is you have to be really good at what you do. Second is you have to talk to people who are doing well in life and not talk to people who are struggling. And this will sound very harsh, but the truth is that struggling people are operating in their own world. And if you tell them anything, they will give you something which is from their own perspective. Getting opinions is one thing, but the reality is that there's a lot of successful stuff happening in this world, and maybe you're just not in reach with those people. So rather than talking to people who have a limited mindset, you go on internet and you find people who are doing well in your domain. So if you're doing design, you don't have to care about people who are struggling in design. because they will struggle forever. You have to figure out how are people succeeding in this domain and reverse engineer from that. So after you do the second step, the third step is marketing yourself. If you don't know how to market yourself, if you don't have your own brand, if you don't know how to sell yourself, you will eventually find it very difficult to make people pay for your skill sets. Because if you really think about it, most of the things that we buy in this entire journey of our life, we don't really need them. It's our perception of those items that convinces to buy them. We don't need a fancy house, we don't need a fancy job, we don't need a fancy car, but these brands have made us believe that we need them. And you have to make someone believe that they need you. And they might actually need you, but you really have to pitch in, you really have to sell yourself to a point where you are the best person for their job. And that is what you need to learn. You really need to know how to market yourself, how to sell yourself, and that is a completely separate study. So let me brief it very quickly because we're almost at 128. The first step would be being really good at what you do. The second step is you need to be in touch with people who are succeeding in life and not in touch with people who have a limited mindset. The third is you need to know how to sell yourself and how to market yourself. If you take care of these three things, you will never feel scared कि मुझे जॉब मिलेगी या नहीं मिलेगी, प्लेसमेंट होगी या नहीं मिलेगी, मैं कभी कमा पाऊंगा या नहीं कमा पाऊंगा. Trust me, there's enough abundance in this world, and you have a lot to do if you take care of these three things.
Okay, Bhaiya. Just last question that a lot of people have been asking us is that what was your, what was your methods? How did you, first get started working at Swiggy at such a young age, and how then moving forward, moving up from there? How did you do it? People are really, curious about that part of it.
I know they must be very curious, and that is the exact reason why I have my show. Take It Easy basically takes you through my journey from college to where I am right now, because whatever experiences that I've had, whatever opportunities, failures, whatever navigation that I've done, I had documented all of these things because I wanted people to get access to this information while it is relevant. So these answers are so complex, these answers are so nuanced that I can't really tell them very quickly. And sometimes even I forget what I did back then. So Take It Easy takes you through that journey. Every single episode goes super deep into that. So if anyone's interested as to why I did certain things, how I took my decisions, I would recommend everyone to go to Spotify and listen to all these episodes because that is sort of like my diary. That is where I've documented every single step that I've taken.
Okay, Bhaiya. Just before you go, I know you had some other engagements at 1:30. So before you go, just any final words, to inspire and guide people for their journey in hackathons as a whole.
Just regularly learn, regularly update your models because it's tech is evolving at a very fast speed. Even if you consider Figma, the kind of updates and transformations that Figma has had in the year of 2020 are mind blowing. It's impeccable with the kind of stuff that they're doing. So if you're still operating with old models, you will soon be outdated. Either your work will be automated or you will be outdated. So you have to make sure that you regularly update your models. And second, you have to work in a manner where you are your own product. See, if you are a person who can do really good Java and only do really good Java or do really good Figma, you are basically replaceable. Because in the next 5 to 6 years, a robot or some bunch of code will replace your job. But no one can copy Ansh Mehra or no one can copy Utkarsh. No one can actually imitate the way Utkarsh would see something. No one can imitate the way Utkarsh thinks or your approaches or the way you handle conflicts. So you have to be your own product because it's very difficult to imitate a human being. Robots can never replace human beings or the way a human being thinks because we are so complex. Our brains are such complex, they're beautiful machines. They're absolutely beautiful, magnificent machines. So if you build yourself, if you become your own product rather than your skill set, something which is changing with time, if you are your own product, you will always be valued. And with time, your value will compound because the more you grow, the elder you get, the wiser you get. and you will get more returns in the longer term. As compared to learning a specific skill, learning how to win at hackathons, you will never go to hackathon after 2 years. Eventually, all of these softwares and all of these databases will go out of date. So why would you want to become an expert at winning hackathons? Why would you want to become an expert at building apps? Because maybe 10 years from now, mobiles would be eradicated and everyone would be wearing headsets. You don't really have to be an expert in a specific field because fields are getting evolved. But what is not getting evolved is a human being. Like a good human being will always be in value. You will always be in demand if you're a really good, strong person. If you're a good, strong human being, if your body is fit, if your mind is fit, if you really know how to think, your value will compound with time. So that is one advice that I would leave you guys with, that don't just focus on learning skills, grow as a human being, and you will always be in demand.
I guess that was a very good ending to this entire talk that we had. Guys, I hope you enjoyed talking with Ansh Mehra. We'll be sharing his links, his socials, and also the podcast Take It Easy, which personally I actually really like, and I like it taught me a lot in general about life. So I would recommend each and every one of you to listen to it. We'll be sharing those links with you. And thanks, Anshbhaiya, for joining us today. I know this
Thank you
was
so
on
much.
kind of a short notice, but thanks for coming anyways.
No problem.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Yeah.
See you. Bye.
See you. Bye. Guys, just don't leave yet. We actually have a surprise for you. So, like Bhaiya just said, that you need to have update your tool set. There is a constraint of time in hackathons. You need to be quick about the things that you do. You need to streamline the flow of your workflow of your building process. So for that, we have created for you a components library in Figma. So let me just share my screen and show you what I'm talking about. So basically, we have you can download this from our portal, and basically what it offers is a set of reusable components that you can basically use in your own projects. It's completely free to use. There are no issues that are involved. You can basically select any of the components that you want, and you can basically drag them into your projects, copy them, reuse them. There are set of icons too, because icons are one thing that are extremely hard to find in today's day and age for some reason. So yeah, I hope that was an exciting session for you all, and stay tuned because there are two more webinars coming up in this Hagrid.pkg session, and check out the website to download the Figma file and all the other links that we'll be providing you. Thank you guys. Hope you had a nice time.